Hello, everyone. It's great to see you all, and thank you for coming. My name is Homa Shojai. I'm on the advisory board of Arts, Letters, and Numbers, an associate curator of the Citizenship exhibition, and a big fan of GCE. I want to welcome you all to our conversation today called Reimagining Education for a Climate-Altered World. We are holding this event in collaboration with Global Citizenship Experience Lab School in Chicago. Sorry, guys, okay. We're holding this event in collaboration with GCE Lab School based in Chicago and Greenbacker Capital based in New York City. These two organizations are re-architecting what is possible in education when corporate values align with community needs. The need for education that inspires students to engage and help problem solve in solutions to our world's most pressing challenges. Greenbacker Capital is committed to developing tomorrow's workforce to meet the needs of one of the fastest growing global job sectors, renewable energy and sustainable infrastructure. GCE Lab School has partnered with them to bring customized inquiry and project-based courses to under-resourced schools around the world. Project-based learning is a game changer in helping close the achievement gap, a proven model that increases student achievement by 10%, regardless of socioeconomic or cultural background. Today's session will take us on the journey of a student. The goal is to amplify our curiosity around climate issues and solutions, and hopefully leave with a personal action plan on how we can make a difference. I want to thank my dear friend Cheryl Curcio, the co-founder of GCE, for bringing such an important discussion to our exhibition in City X Venice as part of the 17th Venice Architecture Biennale. I will now introduce three of the speakers in this morning's program. Stephanie Leet is a PhD student in the Faculty of Education at McGill University. She has worked with GCE over the last decade as a teacher, curriculum designer, and trainer. Her current research examines the intersections among global citizenship, sustainable development, and climate change education, and how they can be holistically integrated into education systems. Will Johnson is a STEAM teacher at GCE. He has taught for over 20 years in the US and Mexico at schools with wide-ranging approaches to teaching and learning. Though a mathematician by training, he is most comfortable in an interdisciplinary classroom setting. Mena Sevin is a member of GCE's class of 2021. They are currently in their first year at Columbia College in Chicago, studying animation and graphic design. I look forward to our conversation, and I thank you all for making this event possible.
Thank you so much, Homa, for that welcome and introductions. And also thank you to Arts, Letters, and Numbers for partnering with us for this event. And thank you to Greenbacker Capital as well for making this workshop series possible, and also for supporting GCE in the development of the curriculum that you'll all be receiving access to at the end of this workshop. I would like to start just with a land acknowledgement. As Homa said, I'm a PhD student at McGill University, which is in Montreal. And McGill is situated on the traditional territory of the Kanien'kehá:ka, a place which has long served as a site of meeting and exchange amongst nations. As we convene today to talk about sustainability, let us thank and recognize those who have, for millennia, served as stewards of the land from which we are joining today. And I want to give everyone an opportunity to introduce yourselves and let us know where you're joining from today. We have many time zones joining us. For some of us, it's Saturday morning and we got out of bed early on a Saturday to join the call. For some of us, it's Saturday night and everything in between. So I would like us to get very familiar with using the chat today. This is going to be a very participatory event. So let's make sure we all know how to use the chat by writing your name, if you have preferred pronouns, and let us know where you're joining from today. Wow. Lots of different cities already. Welcome. Great. So we've got all across the US. We have Shanghai, we have Iran. Great, this is great to see. Welcome to everybody. Thank you for joining us today. So as we continue to fill up the chat, I just want to give you a little bit more background information about GCE. Homa, you did a great job of introducing the school. So we have 3 representatives from GCE today who are going to be kind of providing a learning journey for you that mirrors the experience that we have at GCE. It's an independent high school in Chicago, which means we have quite a bit of freedom in our curriculum and the way we organize our program. And so I don't want to give you too much information about how we organize our curriculum up front, because I want us to experience it first, and then we'll come back at the end and kind of reflect on how this experience was organized. But I want to think about our title. The name of the school is Global Citizenship Experience. And so we've thought about that name a lot. The name means a lot to us. And I want to ask this of everybody who's with us today: what does that mean to be a global citizen? If you're building a school around global citizenship, what should a global citizen know? What should a global citizen be able to do? What are some of the issues a global citizen should be thinking about? And let's return to the chat again and just fill that up with, like, what comes to mind when you think of a global citizen? How would you describe a global citizen? What are they thinking about and what are they able to do? Okay, respect for others, desire to take action to make the world a better place, working together. Caring about the globe, thinking of humans as a unit, not to think of the profit of a nation, non-hierarchical, cross-cultural. So I'm seeing a lot about community, not just thinking about yourself as an individual, but thinking about your community, thinking about the wider communities that you're a part of. Thinking about good life and how to make sure everyone has a chance to experience it. That's a great one. What does it mean to have a good life? And how can we make sure that everyone has equal access to that ability to lead a good life? Great. Understanding global issues, yes. Yeah, so at GCE, we've really thought about what is, like, we have educational standards. We know that we want to make sure that our students have basic literacies in math and writing and science and technology. But when it comes to building global citizens and cultivating global citizenship, we looked to the United Nations. And I don't know how familiar everyone is with the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, but this is a series of global priorities that were adopted by the United Nations in 2015. And they've given us 15 years to make progress on these 17 issues. So between now and 2030, as a global community, these are issues that we should be working on: alleviating poverty and hunger, making sure everyone has access to healthcare and quality education, taking action on climate change, making sure that the way we produce our goods is responsible and sustainable, and thinking about the way we design cities. There's a lot here. And what we like about these as educational tools is that we can really zoom in and focus on one and think about, what does it mean? What does poverty mean? What do those numbers look like? Why does poverty exist? And we can really dig deep into these issues, but we can also zoom out and we can say, what are the connections between affordable and clean energy and gender equality? How do we make sure that people have access to clean water and sanitation, while also making sure that we are producing goods responsibly and sustainably? So there's a lot here to think about. If you're not very familiar with the goals, I encourage you to dig into them a little bit more, because they're a really interesting way to organize community conversations and to think about your own contributions to sustainability. And I just, as we're thinking about citizenship and global citizenship, I just wanted to share this quote from Kate Knuth, she was a former congresswoman from Minnesota. And she says, "Citizenship at its core is a sacred trust between the individual and the collective. As we face the climate crisis, this trust and how we understand and act on it is more critical than ever." So I think this mirrors some of the things that came up in the chat. Is thinking of the collective. And we're hoping that this conversation can be a good introduction to what it feels to have one of those collective conversations. So today we're going to be really thinking about two of these sustainable development goals. Number 7 is about affordable and clean energy. And number 13 is about taking climate action. But before we move on, I want to think about this phrase here, sustainable development. You've probably heard of it before. I'm sure you've heard the term sustainability. And I want to take a minute to think about, what does that really mean? Does sustainability have a definition? What is sustainable development? And what are we working towards when we have conversations about sustainable development? So this is another opportunity to use this chat and think about, what is your own definition of sustainability or sustainable development? When you think about those phrases, does an image come to your mind? Is there a set of goals that come to mind? How do you know that you are working towards sustainability? Think of it as a paradox. Interesting. Homa, do you want to expand on that in the chat, or just unmute yourself for a moment? Because I think that's an interesting comment.
I just think that a lot of companies speak about sustainable development and nations, and I just feel, I mean, like, I don't want to be like somebody that's against development, but I usually feel that a lot of it is slogans, and a lot of development, what it ends up is that it's not sustainable. So, I mean, like, we're at such a crisis that we're in a really hard place.
Yeah,
Don't ask
yeah.
for solutions.
Well, and some environmental activists say putting the word sustainable and development together, as you said, it's kind of a paradox, like how they don't really fit together. So is it possible to develop sustainably? I'm seeing, yes, the Brundtland report has a definition that we're going to talk about in a minute. Not using up resources and materials, but working with the Earth's resources so as not to deplete them. Yeah. Yeah, these are good. Because I think we hear the term a lot, but maybe we don't spend time really thinking about what it means, and to really to kind of analyze when we talk about sustainability or when something is marketed as sustainable, how do we measure that? What does that exactly mean? Yes, thank you, Peter. You got right to the definition I was going to go to next. There's a couple that I wanted to share with you. So this is one that was released in like the 1980s from the United Nations. Sustainable development is development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. It is a coherent and practical process which enables us to achieve environmental, social, and economic goals at the same time. So rather than trade off and just focusing on preserving the environment or building the economy or offering social services, we can be thinking about all three of those at the same time. And I wanted to also share this. This is a principle that I was introduced to when I was just out of college. The 7th generation principle is based on an ancient Haudenosaunee or Iroquois philosophy that makes us think about the decisions that we make today should result in a sustainable world 7 generations into the future. So whatever we're doing today, what impact is that going to have? What impact will be felt 7 generations into the future? So that's one that I always like to think about when I'm talking about sustainability is what is the long-term impact of the decisions that we're making today? So education. Today we are participating in an educational event. We're not formal students. We're not enrolled in a formal program. But education has been seen as an enabler for all 17 SDGs, for achieving all 17 SDGs. So I just want to make sure that you're familiar with this term, or if you see the acronym ESD, we're talking about how do we educate about sustainable development. And this is from the Berlin Declaration that just came out a few months ago. Education is a powerful enabler of positive change of mindsets and worldviews. And ESD as an enabler of all 17 SDGs is the foundation for the required transformation, providing everyone with the knowledge, skills, values, and attitudes to become change agents for sustainable development. So we're not just talking about learning the facts, learning about climate change, learning about poverty, learning a bunch of statistics. Education for sustainable development is really getting at changing our mindsets and our worldviews. There are some real fundamental shifts that need to happen in how we are living on this earth if we are to sustain Earth for the next 7 generations. So education for sustainable development is really about changing the way we live on this earth. And this is something that doesn't need to happen or can't just happen in formal school settings. At GCE, we want to make the program prepare students for living in this new world and to start thinking about the worldviews that they are using to make decisions. But it's also imperative that sustainability learning is seen as a concept with multiple levels consisting of individual, group, organizational, and societal learning. So what we're participating in right now is kind of an example of social learning. We all need to be participants in this. We all need to, even if you haven't been in the classroom for a very long time, we all need to be students of sustainable development right now. And we all need to be sharing what we know. So I want to turn to kind of our reality right now. If you were paying attention at all over the last few months, you heard about some of these extreme events that happened across the globe. We had unprecedented wildfires. We had major flooding events. We had heat domes where temperatures that had never been recorded before in different areas were recorded for several days at a time. And we just found out, this was just a few days ago, nearly 24 species of birds, fish, and other wildlife are set to be declared extinct and removed from the endangered species list. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change released a new report this summer that has been called a code red for humanity. And so for those of us who are working in education, who have children, who are just concerned global citizens, this is what we came back to school with. This is how we entered the fall, is thinking about these issues and having these issues on our mind. And so how do we make the space to have conversations about what this means, to make sure we're getting this information, but we're having a chance to process it, react to it, have conversations about what it really means, and make sure that we are equipped to do something about it. So the IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, has said that we need to cut our carbon emissions in half by 2030. So we've got about less than 10 years to do that, and reach net zero by 2050. So we've got less than 30 years to cut carbon emissions from our society, from our economy. And so this, like, how do we make this transition? And depending on what your news sources are, you probably hear lots of conversations about if this is possible, are these targets realistic? Is there a path to get there? And so I want to invite a guest to talk us through some of these targets and some of this data and the science and where are we. We introduced Greenbacker Capital at the beginning of this session, but today we have the Chief Operations Officer, Matt Murphy, joining us, who is going to help us sort through some of this information and hopefully have a few minutes at the end to answer some of our questions. But I want to welcome Matt to take the spotlight for a few minutes and just help us understand, like, what is the state of the world right now and what's happening in terms of renewable energy to help us meet these targets.
Thank you, Stephanie, and thanks everyone for having me. I hope the information I'm going to share with you is useful. Can someone advance the slides for me if I ask?
Yeah,
okay.
I'm in charge of those, so you can just let me know.
Great, thank you, Stephanie. So just quickly, Greenbacker Capital, we are a renewable energy builder and owner long-term. So we seek to own these assets over their entire life, which is about 35 years. I am in charge of our operations, and I have a strategy to really push the limit. Solar wind companies, sometimes they feel like they get a pass when it comes to ESG because what they're doing is inherently good. And we don't think that's enough. We think that getting to the goals we need to meet to save this world requires pushing beyond that. So you put a solar field down, what else can you do with that land to help? Can you sequester carbon? Can you plant pollinator-friendly habitat? It's not just a solar array in a field doing good, we can do more. And that is very much our strategy in everything we do. So just to set the stage, this is where we're at. And right here on the right side, this is our problem, right? Is that our emissions, our carbon emissions have been growing significantly since 1950. And in fact, I got involved in this industry in 2006. And until when I got involved in the solar industry, our emissions were still rising. People were still figuring this out, right? And we're talking humanity, things happen slowly. Unless there's catastrophe, crisis, we tend to move slowly. In 15 years, it's only been 15 years really since we realized that we have a significant problem. Next slide. Here's the current state of carbon emitters in the world, and China is the worst. There's a lot to unpack here though, because if you take a look at what we do on an individual level, so per person, the United States is by far the biggest carbon offender, which is super interesting. There's some other issues here, but one thing I would say is that I find a lot of people that I talk to in these industries to say a huge part of it is out of our hands. China's carbon emissions are still growing, so are India's, but I don't see that as the case. And why don't we go to the next slide, and I'll opine on that a little bit. So here's where we currently are. I think there's a few important things here to touch on with the European Union and the United States before we talk about more developing economies in India and China. Is even with the current pledges we've set, we need to vastly increase the speed at which we're doing things to meet them. And we're not talking about long-term deadlines here. Biden's newest proclamation about reducing our carbon emissions by 50% by 2030 is, approaching 8 years away, and that is not a lot of time. And compared to how we are decreasing emissions today, we are not on track to get there. When it comes to the point that I made before about China, India, and people, at least in my industry, sometimes feeling helpless, I believe that is not true, right? Significant amount of the carbon emissions coming from China and India are from manufacturing. We do ultimately have a say in what we choose to buy and how we choose to do business. We are also seeing basically an inability for countries like China in certain manufacturing to actually even maintain what they're doing right now. We, over the next 60 days, will see an increase in the cost of solar panels to put on our sites, because factories are being told to decrease their output because China doesn't even have enough fuel to power their industry, because their industry is working so hard, which is the main reason why it's emitting so much carbon. But the point that I was just drawing at is we have a say in everything we do, right? As the biggest consumers in the world, we can choose what we buy. And those decisions are hard. In my business, they are hard. Buying sustainable product, it costs more money, but I can make that choice. And what I can definitely do is slowly influence the industry to think about these things more and more, and so that we're making better decisions on what we purchase. And that way we're affecting the world and not just our individual countries. Next slide. So this is a very interesting goal, and this is where I'll start focusing on the thing that I'm really the expert on, which is energy generation. And this goal that we have now in 2035, 100% carbon pollution-free electricity by 2035. Right now we are under 15% of that goal, and so we have 8 years essentially to increase the carbon-free supply of electricity by over 6x, which is a pretty dramatic goal. When I got into this industry in 2006, today in 2020, we installed roughly 130 times as much solar power as we did in 2006 when I joined the industry. And we are not even close to on track to hitting these numbers right now, not even close. Next slide. So this is our newfound goals, just for people that aren't aware of the commitments the United States has made in carbon emissions. This orange section, 26 to 20%, 28% below 2005, and that's that year I mentioned. 2005 is where we really started realizing we needed to do something about this. That was the initial goal set by the Obama administration. As you know, we faced 4 years of a dark outlook for the environment in this country, but one of the first things that Biden did when he was elected president is rejoin the Paris Climate Accords, and he made this pledge that we would make a further commitment and go to 50% of 2005 levels by 2030, which is a huge commitment for the amount of time. He didn't give us 10 years or 15 more years, 5 more years. Rapid acceleration of what we're trying to do. Next slide. I'm not going to dive too deep into the slide as it's very confusing and complicated, but I think there's one important thing to realize here is that when Biden set the goal of 50% carbon emission cut by 2030, it was seen as pretty revolutionary, and it's going to be pretty difficult for us to get there in that time. It's going to require massive change. That goal will not even get us to where the Paris Agreement says we need to be. It falls just short of this 1.5 degrees Celsius maximum limit. So even this extraordinary goal that we have set for ourselves that is going to be difficult to achieve and going to need to involve more and more people and more hard decisions, we will still be slightly behind what the Paris Accords have requested of us. Next slide. So this one is where I spend my days, 30% solar by 2030. I mentioned that stat a few slides ago, right? We've installed 132 times the amount of solar we did in 2005 and 2006. It's a crazy number. We, as an energy blend, solar is 2.5% of the energy mix of the United States right now. 2.5%, even despite those numbers. So if we continued on the growth path that we are this year, being the best year for installed solar ever, we wouldn't hit this goal well into the 2050s. So even things like solar, where there is a massive, our industry has revolutionized itself. Solar costs about 20% of what it used to because of industry innovation. We're increasing installed capacity as fast as we can every year, and we're still not even close to hitting these goals. And so what could you do in situations like that? Well, we can all call our senators right now and hope we can get the infrastructure bill passed, because that will go a long way to accelerate how fast we can install, how much we can install. I don't want to leave people with a pessimistic outlook. The numbers and how far we've come are great. It's just the time that we are spending the time we have to fix this problem is very small. And so it requires extraordinary action. You've heard people saying that we should treat climate change like a world war, like a disaster that can bring us all together, and that it's a real emergency. And that's very much true. It really is. So that's all I had. If we have some questions, I think I have a couple of minutes to answer some.
Yeah, thank you so much, Matt. And maybe I'll ask people to unmute themselves if you have a question to ask. I see one in the chat from Cheryl.
Yeah, that's a great question too. So Cheryl, there's a number of things that are a problem. The first is the processes to get your solar rate approved with the utility are cumbersome. In a lot of places, some places have become streamlined and it's a lot easier, but they're cumbersome. It's not easy. You need a Sherpa of solar, so to speak, to guide you through the process. That's one. A second one, which I think it's one of the more important ones, but doesn't get talked about enough, is the industry is growing so quick. There are just not enough skilled people that know what they're doing in order to increase how much solar is installed. I think I read a stat last week that was 40% of the needed renewable energy jobs over the next 5 years in the United States will be filled with qualified employees. So the industry is growing so fast, we just can't staff it. And it has similarities with other industries. People can come in with other experience and thrive here, but it takes time, and it is unique in some aspects. So there's a real labor crunch. And then, just today, and this is becoming more and more of a problem, is supply chain, global crises, COVID, human labor issues. They all slow the industry down. And those things are coming up right now. We're in a supply chain crisis. Polysilicon, there's questions about the labor practices behind mining it, and we don't want to be involved in that. That slows us down a little bit. The steel market is the worst it's ever been. And most of the racking and equipment that we install is the foundations are all steel. Steel by weight is the biggest thing in a solar installation. So there's a number of challenges, but I would say the biggest one and the most unacknowledged one that's the most important is just that we do not right now have the training programs to accelerate the qualified workforce as fast as we need to.
Thank you. I mean, that's one of the things. I'm building a house in California, and they've mandated solar panels for all new construction. And the challenge is exactly that. They don't have the people to install them. So everybody's sitting there going, well, okay, it's mandated, we have to have it, but how do we make it happen? And that's certainly one of the reasons for GCE partnering with Greenbacker is to to make kids aware that this is one of the fastest growing industries, and it doesn't mean that you have to be an engineer. There's job opportunities across all areas of interest.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you. We're going to do 2 more questions. Is it Astrid? Has her hand up?
Yeah, thank you.
And then we'll take one from Terry and we'll move on. Go ahead, Astrid.
Thanks so much, Matthew. There was one word that stuck out to me as you were talking about the time crunch here and the imperative to address it, but it was the word fix. And I wonder if you could talk a little bit about what possible outcomes are we actually looking at, right? Because it's not as if it's like a switch that will flip, but can you paint a broader picture there of like what level of impact, if we were to meet these goals, right? What level of impact would that actually have? I know that's a huge question.
I think it's one of the problems with what we're looking at here, right? It's just that no one really knows. There's a lot of guesses about sea level rise and the frequency of these natural disasters, but no one can really tell you what's going to happen. Should we meet our goals or should we not meet our goals? To me, that's the scariest part. You know, I can see what's happening in the world. You can see sea level rise. You can see what's happening with our ecosystems. And you can see the prevalence of natural disasters. And it's all very scary. And I think the way that I approach it is this can't get worse. And I also approach this whole thing, not just focusing on carbon emissions, but focusing on doing good, right? It's like super easy to understand that we should not do a lot of the things in the world and the environment that we're doing, and that they do cause harm. That harm is hard to count, and that we should, as a species, because we're at this point in our evolution, devote as much time and energy to eliminating as many of those things as possible. So I don't have a good answer for you other than I don't want to find out.
Thanks so much.
Thank you. We have one more question from Terry. How has the pandemic impacted progress toward decreasing carbon emissions?
It's slowed everything down. We as a company have fared fairly well. We've had slowdown, but not a lot. But we are larger, so we have a lot of influence. We can get equipment faster. If there's not enough equipment, we probably will get our share before others. And we are also very nimble in the way that we work, so we can really act quick when we need to. But I mean, in general, I want to say it was something like just under 60% of the projects we wanted to turn on last year in the solar and wind industry got turned on. And it was mostly due to supply chain and just not being able to get components. Good anecdote. I right now have 240,000 solar panels that are manufactured, that are sitting in a warehouse in a quarantined district in Vietnam. I can't get them. Still to this day. Those things are happening pretty regularly. And of course, we all want to get back to normal, right? So when numbers go down, we all march back out there and it gets worse again and things close down. And the recovery of the industry completely from COVID it's not a matter of months. I would suspect the supply chain, we're still going to be dealing with impacts for the next couple of years.
Wow. I know I said that was going to be the last question, but we have one more that came through the chat. This will be the last question. Solar investment returns have not been strong this past year. It seems like Wall Street has not been very positive in the short term. Any reason for this, and what's the 5 and 10-year outlook?
I'm gonna have to just make some assumptions on what that question asks. I think manufacturing, which is solar manufacturing, is what's predominantly on the market. Those companies have been getting killed by the pandemic because they can't get their equipment in the amount of equipment they need to the market, and so their stocks are not good. As far as owners and operators of renewable energy plants, listed companies, the Brookfield Renewables, Altus Solar just went public through a SPAC. the returns on those companies have never been better. The returns of Greenbacker have never been better as well. The manufacturing companies are the ones that have had poor performance. And I think it gets better because, as we just talked, as the shipping crisis in the world and the supply chain crisis eases, there is a lot of solar and wind to be installed. So I think the outlook is good.
Great, thank you, Homa. I think we can bring your question to the group because we're going to move into some group questions next. So thank you so much, Matt, for sharing this information with us and for participating in the Q&A. This is super helpful.
Cool. Thank you.
Thank you.
It's great to be here.
Thanks. So I want to follow up with more questions. I think at this point, probably coming into this workshop and after this presentation, you probably have some additional questions about climate change and our path to decarbonization. And so we're going to spend some time in breakout groups exploring your questions, generating them, recording them, and thinking about them a little bit more. And so what we're going to do is we're actually going to move into breakout rooms, and we're going to do an interactive activity. And everybody should have received a link to the Miro board that we are working from right now. So if you have never worked in Miro, I'm going to give you a quick demonstration right now. Marcus has just put the link into the chat. So what I'm going to ask you to do is have two windows open simultaneously. You're going to have your Zoom window going, and I will continue to screen share there. And then I'll also ask you to open the Miro board. And thank you, Matt. And so the Miro board you can actually interact with if you've used it before. I see people already zooming around and kind of looking at the bird's eye view of the presentation that we've gone through so far. If you have not yet used Miro, I want to do a quick demonstration and kind of mimic what you're going to be doing in your breakout group. So the first thing that you're going to be doing is just introducing yourself. We are going to create groups of, I can't see the number of how many people are on the call, but we're going to have about 5 people in each room. So I want you to start off by introducing yourself and introduce yourself by thinking about who you are as a learner. We talked about social learning and lifelong learning. And even though you might not be considered a formal student, we're probably all learning things all the time. We're working on a project where we need to build some new kind of skill. So as an introduction, I want you to talk about a project that you're working on or something that you're learning right now, and what is your process for learning that? And then we're going to go through a series of questions where we're going to be recording on the Miro board. So, Will, maybe we can just demonstrate this process so everybody knows what to do when they get into their group. Is Jimena here as well? I don't know if Jimena ever was able to log in.
Jimena did make it. Yes.
Oh, good. Hi. So I'm going to pretend I'm in a group of 3 with Jimena and Will. And maybe, Will, would you mind just introducing yourself according to these prompts here? What's a project you're working on?
Okay, and which I'm in the Miro board. I'm trying to see on the Zoom call, which one are you, which?
Yep, so I'm still projecting my screen. So we are, yeah. I'm looking at breakout room discussions, and I'm asking you this first prompt, which is to introduce yourself by telling us what is a project you're working on or something you're learning, and how are you learning about it?
Sure. So you should be able to see me here in that. Okay, so, and Stephanie, just to make sure that this is just wide open, not school
Totally
related.
wide open. It doesn't have to be related to work or school or anything.
Well, perfect. Well, it's a nice Saturday, and I've got a mind after this call, after this presentation, to get out and do a little bit of yard work for myself, a little bit of gardening. So what I am learning about is, hey, how can I do some basic landscaping, like, some in terms of my house and what I need to do to fix up my lawn. So I'm really interested about that. So that's my question. I'll put it in here. My question is how to.
Okay, so you're going straight for the questions. Good.
Yeah. Landscape. So that's my question. That is weighing on my mind. And obviously, you can see I'm taking a very relaxed personal approach to something that, coming off the global things of climate change and so forth. But is kind of proof of concept. This is where we're going from this. And then once I have that basic question, then
yeah, and I'll guide you through these. I want to make sure that Jimena has a chance also. Maybe I'll ask Jimena after we do these introductions, when we get into our groups and talk about what's something that we're learning, we're going to go into our Miro board, as Will has done here, and put a question in here. So I've got little Post-it notes as guides for everyone. The first thing you're going to do is talk about what are some questions that you have based on the presentation that we just saw? What are questions that you have about climate change? And maybe, Jimena, I can ask you to help us with that. What is a question that you have after being in this session, or that you came into this session with? And can you write that on a green Post-it note and put it in this inner circle? Show us how to do that.
Yeah, of course. Let me. All right. Well, I stayed with the questions about climate change. I've been hearing a lot and seeing a lot about it, so I feel like that's just stayed in my mind still.
Great. Is there a specific question that you have that you want to put in the middle here to discuss with your group?
Yes.
Great. How can I make a big impact on climate change? That's a big question, and we are going to leave that in the middle here. After everyone in your group shares a question, I'm going to ask you to move into the next circle, the outer circle here, which is now that we have these questions, what's a resource that you can share with the group based on your questions? Is there maybe a website that you would like to share? Is there a group that you work with that's doing good work? Is there action being taken? Is there something that you can share with your group that helps us investigate these questions? And so again, if you haven't had a chance to work with the sticky notes, we're gonna click on this icon here on the left. I'm gonna choose orange for this next outer circle. I'm gonna bring it in here, and I'm gonna say I know of a really good TED Talk by the Stockholm Resilience Center. If you would like to get fancy, you can add links in here as well, but at this point, we're just kind of generating ideas. And then when you get to, everybody in your group has had a chance to share some resources, we're gonna start talking about what are some ways that you can take action? Do you know of groups that are already taking action? Would you like to take action, but you don't know how? Maybe you need some support. So in using a blue sticky note, you are going to start putting together some of those. Lost my sticky note. You are going to start generating some action items that you can take, and how you might need some support in order to take action. So if I'm working with Will, we might talk about how can we do landscaping that also sequesters carbon. I'm going to do carbon friendly landscaping or climate friendly landscaping. Okay, so it looks like everybody has had a chance to move around a little bit here, and hopefully you've done a little bit of practice. What we're going to do now is get into our breakout groups. So if you are assigned to group 1, you have a workspace right here on your Miro board. Group 2, group 3, I'm not sure how many groups we're going to be doing, but you each will have a workspace. And your prompts are right here. Make sure you start with an introduction. and then you're going to work through these questions with your group members. So Marcus, can you help us get into our breakout groups?
Sure. Actually, Doan is going to set up the breakout room,
Great. Okay.
breakout rooms right now. And if anybody has any issues or challenges navigating in Miro, please stay in the main room, and we will help. So it might either be myself or Doan, but we can do this together. So if you're having a hard time getting Post-its onto the board, or finding out where we're supposed to be, just stay in the main room, and either my fingers and clicking will help out, or Doan's will.
Great. So can you guide us through? It looks like we're asking people to self-select and to join one of the breakout rooms. Can we just do a quick run through of how to do that if no one has ever chosen their own breakout room?
We'll start putting people in rooms.
Okay,
So
great.
we don't have to click through that.
Great. So once you're in your room, we'll have about 20 minutes for conversation.
So we are which group? Group
5.
Group 5. Thank you.
5. So Damon is big brother.
Yeah. So I'm going to go over to group 5, and I am happy to fill in the Post-it notes for us, if that's easier for everyone.
Oh, that'd be great.
Sounds great to me.
Okay. Excellent. So I'm happy to get us started with an introduction. I'm not sure if you already did that.
No, we didn't.
Okay, great. My name's Marcus, and one of the big projects that I'm working on and also learning a lot about is building a new campus for a school, and all the different layers of policy, of sustainability, and pedagogy that go into that process. It's a remarkable number of layers, and the ways I'm learning about it are a little bit of research on my own, but also getting exposed to the experiences and the network of connections that the people I work with have around. So it's been really informative to see how these different processes play out with the people that I work with every day, and just being able to absorb what those knowledge and experiences and activities are, and how that affects things that materialize in the real world for what we do every day.
So do you work for GCE?
I do. Yeah.
Gotcha. What's your title, if you don't mind me asking, just to
Not at all. I'm the director of communication and technology. So I manage all the tools we use to communicate, and also the outward expressions of the school in most areas.
Great.
So Marcus, do you feel like the issues that you're encountering in building the new campus? I don't know. Can I ask you a question, or do I have to tell you what my concern is at this moment?
Either one. Either one.
Do you feel that these are real concerns, or do you feel like it's a nuisance? Like it's just like some sort of policy that like has a kind of a slogan, but
Like lip service being paid to it.
Yeah.
I feel that these are absolutely real issues, but what I do see is that they are often in conflict with another kind of sustainability, and that is the kind that's not environmentally or ecological sustainability. It is simply sustainability in its broadest sense. And what we talk about a lot in the building project is budget practical. So for ourselves, what is the sort of trade-off between what we can afford to do, how fast can we afford to do it, and what we would really love to do if those limitations and those other factors weren't informing those kinds of decisions. So in very general terms, that means we can make a wonderfully sustainable organization and building and environment, but doing so would compromise our ability to exist, because we just wouldn't be able to pay for it. So what are the steps that we can take to close that gap, and so that we can make the decisions that we want to make based on values and not based on other factors like money.
Yeah, I don't know.
My concern is that when people have those, as everyone does when you're talking about budget, which is a real concern in any project, but when everyone is operating according to those restraints, there's not a lot of and these boxes have to be ticked, that at the end of the day, there's not a lot of incentive for transparency, so people can see what other people are doing. I think overall, by the way, I'm Terry Abruzzo, and I'm thinking about these issues for something that I'm writing with respect to global crises and how human beings respond to them individually and as a collective, and how to encourage collective behavior that most benefits the planet as a whole. And this may sound ridiculously pie in the sky, but it seems to me that there should be some well, for example, the LEED standards that govern, architectural projects. I've understood from a number of friends who are architects that those are really hollow standards, that at the end of the day, they may even do more harm than good, because they create the illusion that sustainability is being addressed when in fact it's not. And that's my concern with a lot of this. And it really was a concern for me with the things that Matt was saying, that when you have individual companies with a profit motive, I wasn't talking when I asked him how the pandemic affected carbon emissions, I wasn't talking about how it affected his company and the success of what they were doing. I was talking about on a global basis, with slowdowns of particular things. Were there, I was curious if there were improvements. I know here in Chicago that actually air quality got worse because it's such a rail hub, that there was so much, that we were one of the few lovely places that suffered from worse air quality. So my question and concern is what are the mechanisms that we're going to create to de-silo all of these individual concerns and come up with more global structures and transparency that will really address what we're trying to address?
Great. So I wrote down what are the mechanisms we can use to de-silo and increase transparency on issues of sustainability.
What is the prompt? What do I have to say about myself?
What are you learning about? What are you working on? And what are the sort of tools and methods you use to do that?
Is it about, so in terms of in regard to climate?
It could be anything. So if you're struggling, if you're working on a painting and you're thinking about an idea, what is the process that you use to puzzle over that idea and to work your way through it? And this is just an exercise for us to build a pathway from the questions we're asking about sustainability toward first the resources that we can use to find those, and then where do we go? What's our first steps to take action? So it can start.
So I'm trying to create an exhibition online. It's the first time as a curator I'm trying to do an exhibition online. So the only thing that I'm doing my way, my method is to do it. And then by doing it in every step of the way, try to problem solve and discuss what it entails. And then, like sort of go forward blindfold, which is my way. That's my method, Marcus, So this is like what I'm doing. My concern about the environment is that I have totally lost my, like, it's so funny because today, like when Stephanie was talking, I was like, how nice it is to listen to her because I believe her. And there's so many people that I don't believe.
Right.
Like I just think that like they're totally lying and
Totally.
And I'm like, and I don't trust, and like the graphs and all of these things. I'm just like, yeah, like, thank you so much. So my problem, I swear to God, guys, don't laugh at me. I like pray for the ozone layer hold. Like, I'm like prayer, like it's just so archaic, like my activism in environment. Sure, I use a water filter instead of buying bottled water, like that's something that I did last year. I switched and I don't buy bottled water anymore. But honestly, I'm just like, ugh, like I just feel horrible.
Yeah.
So I pray and I,
Pray for a hole in the ozone layer.
I do. I'm like, oh baby, like, oh my God, I'm like, I think we're so insane. Like they're like planning to go to Mars and live underground and like grow plants with like some kind of oxygen from somewhere. I'm like, well, we have it here. If you just repair the ozone layer, we can just live here in like glory. And we're just so idiotic. I mean, like, we're just so crazy.
Yeah, there's really something to that, Homa. False flag concept is real, and governments have been doing it for quite some time. To initiate something so scary or something tragic in order to propel the collective into action is a real phenomenon that we've used. We in the broadest sense have used in different contexts, but maybe it is something. Obviously, a global pandemic hasn't quite done the trick.
Right.
Maybe we do need.
No, exactly.
Right.
Like,
or wildfires or floods.
Yeah, all of those things, right?
Yeah, doesn't seem to make a dent. And so that's unfortunately, Homa, all I was thinking was the ozone layer will be like, oh, one more thing.
Right.
I don't know. I think I just think that we're so silly and we're gonna, like, not us, but I think that our future generations are going to like pay the price. So that, like, that 7th generation thing that Stephanie was talking about, I think that we're just like, we've done so horrible in that sense to our future generations. And and another thing that I wanted to say, which I forgot, but I will hopefully remember. I don't know what it was.
That now know why that detergent at Whole Foods is called 7th generation. I was like, well, I learned something new today.
That's fascinating. I didn't realize that. Yeah.
Oh, you're so right. That's beautiful. So Marcus, are we good? Are we acing it, or should we move on to the second donut?
I think we have some good questions here, and we can bounce back and forth if we think of something else. But let's share with each other where.
Okay, I have a good question.
Yeah.
It seems to me, I don't know if I'm well informed or not, but that the Scandinavian countries have achieved some like unbelievable markers on kind of climate issues. Why don't we just copy them? Like, why do we have to reinvent the wheel?
Doesn't it seem that there's a certain psychology that to different countries and the expectations and the entitlement that until that changes, or
yeah, I mean, I think, Terry, I think that it's absolutely the entitlement, but I also really think like when, like in the beginning of the presentation where it was that like education is truly the strongest thing to change people's minds.
Agreed. But who's doing the education? I mean, is it Matt Murphy telling you that all we need to do is put up solar panels, even if, you know, the carbon footprint to bring them from Vietnam is 20 times worse than whatever carbon emissions they'll save? You know, it's who's doing the education. I utterly agree with you, Homa, but it's
Yeah. No, I totally agree with you. Like it's that whole trust issue.
exactly,
You know?
exactly.
It's such the trust issue. And
Right.
because of capitalism, I think that we don't have trust in anybody because everybody just wants to milk
Right.
their own cow.
Right. Yep.
But I have trust for Stephanie. I would vote for her, you know.
It's so funny. I know there's some, I don't know if it's her voice or her demeanor, but she definitely does engender trust when she talks. Right?
Yeah.
She does.
And you know, like that whole thing that she started with American, I mean, or Canadian Indians or something.
They say that on NPR now all the time because I think it's McGill, right? Yeah, that I think that whenever they broadcast from McGill, they have to make that disclaimer about being on the stolen lands.
That's so cool. That is really cool.
Right? I know.
Our breakout room is going to close in 30 seconds. I think we have a really great start here.
Nice to meet
Okay,
you, Marcus.
nice to see you, Marcus. Thanks for coming to our room.
And I think for Homa's issue with her, what she's doing, maybe she can borrow you from Cheryl.
Yeah.
And you can help her with the virtual pavilion. Because in all your spare time, Marcus.
I'm happy to have that conversation.
All right. It was really nice meeting you.
Yeah, thank you. We'll see you back in the bigger room.
Bye.
Okay. Ciao, ciao.
Welcome back, everyone. Do we have everyone back at this point? I think we do. I hope that you had some interesting conversations. It was fun watching the Miro board populate. I was zoomed out and watching everyone's cursors move around. And so I hope that you all had interesting conversations, but you weren't able to participate in all the conversations that were happening. So I want to give you just a few minutes now that you've had a little bit of practice with the Miro board, and hopefully you are comfortable zooming in and out and scrolling to check out the other boards. So if you were in group 2, then visit the other boards that are not group 2 here, and just take a look at some of the notes, the post-it notes that group made. And if you find something interesting, maybe there's a question that you feel like you can comment on, or if there's a resource maybe that they were looking for that you can add to, I'd like you to contribute by creating a new sticky note and do that in pink so that those new comments stand out in a different color. So we'll take maybe just about 3 minutes to scroll through. And
Stephanie, I'm sorry. This is Terry. I'm sorry to.
Yeah,
I don't
sure.
see myself on here, and so I don't know how to get anywhere.
This is Diane, and we were in group 1, just
Okay.
Jeff Johnson and myself, just 3 of us, and we never got the Miro board back. We never did any of this, and I'm not showing myself up on your screen, Stephanie, either. I don't know how to move.
Okay, probably because I'm doing a screen share, and so you can't see all the participants at the same time. Marcus, do you have any other advice?
If your Zoom meeting is in full screen, there's a bar at the top, and you can click on the word view options next to the green bar, and you can take yourself out of full screen. And that way it might be easier for you to click to other windows on your desktop. So if you have, and we can put the link to the Miro board in the chat again, but that will open it in a browser window instead of seeing what you're seeing through the Zoom meeting.
Gotcha. Thanks.
I'm sorry you were having that experience. We should have visited all the rooms to make sure everybody was set.
Yeah, I'm still not able to get up this, but that's okay. I can't seem to
Okay.
zoom in and look
So
at it. Okay,
I'll zoom in so that we can at least look at
Great.
some of these other boards
Great.
and see what other groups we're working on. And so again, if you are in the Miro board, go ahead and feel free to comment using a pink sticky note. So let's take another minute just to scroll through. If you have any comments to make, go ahead and make those comments.
Stephanie, is there any ability to share these? These are really interesting to me. And since I don't have access to them, I'd love to see them after the fact, just to see what everybody came up with.
Yeah, we're going to make sure that while the Miro board link will remain live. So it might be easier to figure that out when there's not a Zoom call going on at the same time. So we'll make sure that we share that. And we're also going to compile all these resources and put them onto one board, and we can share that as a PDF.
Thanks.
Sure.
Thank you. Yeah, because I'm still not able to move around on the current board, but that's all right.
Okay.
I'll wait for the other one.
So I see we're starting to get a little bit short on time. I see a couple of these pink notes, and I'm wondering if someone who wrote a pink note can share the comment that they made and maybe pose a question to the group that you commented on. Jimena, do I see you writing a comment right now?
I am writing a comment.
Would you mind sharing that with us? And then
Sure.
kind of asking the group number 3 to react in some way to your Post-it note?
Yeah. So the question I'm reacting to is, how do we get our government to focus on the importance of solar? And I didn't finish writing my Post-it note, but I believe that the best way to do so is either to, vote in politicians who have that as a very core part of their campaign, or who are aware of the problem and want to do something about it, and or protest. And because the only way to get heard around here is to come together, and also starting small. Talk to your alderman, talk to the people in your local political sphere, and just keep going bigger and bigger, I think. Because you can write letters to, I don't know, the president, but I don't know if he'll ever read them.
My daughter got a letter from the president after writing a letter, but I don't think it was very personalized. Does anyone from group 3?
So we were group 3, and I think one of the things that we discussed was the fact that we as Americans don't like government, being told by government what to do. And so while yes, I think we need to vote for the right politicians and have that awareness, it's like we were brainstorming on is, again, it's around education. How do we get people in venues like this talking about it and personally what they can do? But the more that it's a socially led movement. I loved Greenbacker's comments on the, how do we make this a war that we're all coming together on? One of the things that we talked about in our group was, much like the world came around the COVID vaccine and working together and trying to solve a common problem, how do we motivate people to support that initiative from a social point of view versus.
And even that's the thing. Not everyone in the world was with the vaccine.
Right. And the vaccine equity is still a huge issue. I agree. And I think that we touched on that same issue in our session too, that beyond, and in groups like this, you're going to get a self-selecting group of people who care. And how do you, when there's a level of entitlement and familiarity with a certain lifestyle and behaviors and cultures, it seems like until that changes, it will be very hard to have any kind of systemic change. And we were talking about what could actually make that happen. One of our group members joked, maybe if there was actually a hole in the ozone, but we said that, the pandemic doesn't seem to have done it. Wildfires haven't done it. Floods haven't done it. Would a hole in the ozone layer actually grab anyone's attention?
Honestly, there's going to be people who see the world burning and still think everything is fine.
Yeah,
Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I recently read somewhere that it only takes about 3.5% of the population to get behind an issue to really start making a change. And I think that we're starting to reach that tipping point. At least when you're in circles like this, it seems like it's a lot more than 3.5%. But I think after some of these events and the extreme weather events are starting to hit closer and closer to home, and they're becoming more frequent. So I think that that's when we're going to start seeing the tides turning. Do we have maybe time for one more comment? I see one more pink Post-it note. Or if any other group would like to share something that they want to highlight from their group conversation or something that they saw in someone else's board. No other burning comments from, let's see, groups 1, 4, 2.
I guess in scanning through, I was like, what is coat of many colors in group 2? I think it was.
Group 2, can anybody respond to that?
Yes, that was mine. So what we were talking about fashion and fast fashion, just throwing it out. And I just said, hey, I'm going to get a hat tip to Dolly Parton, the song Coat of Many Colors. Instead of recycling, patch it up, keep wearing it. Kind of the old, what's the saying? Use it up, wear it out, make it do or do without. So just kind of a fun way to get some perspective on our consumerism or disposal, planned obsolescence for fashion. Here's another approach to it.
Yeah, and there's a lot you can, if that's something, an issue that you're interested in, just looking up fast fashion. There's a lot of research on that and what different companies are doing about fast fashion and movements working against fast fashion, which is like this constant disposable culture that we have towards clothing and textiles and wearing the amount of time that we keep our clothing and wear it just once or twice and then dispose of it and buy something new every time we have a new event. That is an interesting issue right now that has a lot of research around that you can find. And I know we are running out of time, so we don't have, we're not going to be able to jump into action items as much as I was hoping to. I'm hoping that was one of your prompts about actions that you can take. And so I'm hoping that in your breakout conversations, you were able to talk about that a little bit. I wanted to just quickly come back to, yeah, go ahead.
No, someone asked a question in the chat about where did you get the 3.5% number?
I have it in this book, which is I'm going to recommend to everyone. It's called All We Can Save. It just came out this year. And this is a great book that talks, it's every chapter is written by a woman and talking about the actions that women are taking from every possible angle on climate change, from working to close down coal plants to starting artist movements and storyteller movements to create more positive visions of the future, political movements, like every scale, like there's something for everyone in this book, and there's poetry in here. Everything is written in a different style. Each chapter or each entry is, like 3 to 10 pages. So it's very easy to get through. You can read it in whatever order you want. But it's a very, very good read to introduce yourself to all the different issues surrounding climate change.
Stephanie, this is Diane Dahl,
Yep.
the whole group. I am about 3/4 of the way through listening to it on audio, on
Great.
Audible, and it's fantastic. And it's it's women authors and poets, but it's not just for women, it's for
Right.
all of us. If you're human, you'll find something interesting in this book.
Yeah, and actually I was going to recommend this. I know that GCE has always thought of doing like some sort of a one book, one community read. And so if you are part of a community, or if you have a local library that does something like that, I would recommend this book, because this would be an excellent choice for everyone in your community to read, and then you can organize events around it. So I want to just kind of bring us back to the GCE and kind of the learning journey that we have gone through today. Starting with, we always start with kind of building our understanding of a question or a concept. And so that's why we brought in Matt Murphy today to kind of give us some of that background information so that we could start interacting with each other and having conversations. And hopefully this will end in some kind of an action, even if it's a small action or a small commitment that you make. I also want to encourage everyone to, if you really connected with someone, or if you met someone that you didn't know before today, you can use the chat feature. You should be able to choose someone's name in the chat if you want to send them a direct message, and make sure that you exchange contact information. We won't be sharing that as a group. We're blind copying everyone. But if you would like to share your information with someone right now, I encourage you to do that through a private message using the chat. And I just want to share this final quote with you that's also from this book. Naomi Klein has a short section that she wrote as part of the book. And she says, "Our current moment is markedly different from environmental movements in the past. And the reason for that is twofold. One part having to do with a mounting sense of peril, the other with a new and unfamiliar sense of promise." And so kind of going hand in hand with these mounting disasters that we are experiencing, I think that really is bringing people together. The technology is starting to catch up. People are starting to catch up. Youth movements are starting to catch up. Politicians are starting to catch up, and we might not be quite where we want to be right now. But if we all keep pushing, it takes all these little actors, it takes all hands on deck to make change. And so I will leave you with that. We have reached the end of our session. We've gone a little bit over. I'm happy to stay on for another couple of minutes if anybody has other questions. But I want to thank everybody for joining us today, especially if you had to wake up very early to join us, or if you are staying up very late to be here. Thanks to everyone. And we're going to be back here again in 2 weeks, talking about design and engineering for the future. And I don't know, Marcus, do you have any final thoughts about how to access the curriculum? I have a link that I can show here.
That's right. This link, at this link is accessible all the projects that GCE has developed in coordination and collaboration with Greenbacker Capital. We'll also be sending a follow-up email with some reflection and some links. This link will be one of them, but also, of course, the link to the Miro board and all of the comments and post-it notes that are a product of it.
Thank you so much, everyone. You're free to sign off now.
Thank you, everyone. It was so amazing. Thanks, guys.
Thanks for your participation, and spread the word about the session on the 16th of October.
Definitely, we will do that. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.